Right, so you join me here today at the beautiful Packington Somers Fisheries. It's a fishery that I've fished a bit in the past, but I've never actually seen this lake. What's it called? Is it Siblings? I thought it was Willows. It says Siblings, so yeah, it's one of the Siblings, tiny little lake, but it's typical of a lot of the lakes around the country where I'm fishing at the minute. Fishing a lot of qualifiers, a lot of time. Quite often I've never even been to the venue, or I've never even seen the lake before. And like today, I've never seen this lake before, so I thought I'd show you how I approach totally new lake. Totally new to me. I've got no information apart from that there's a few F1s and carp, and I've seen a few carp mixing around. So all I can go in is sort of that sort of basic information, and if you like, there's sort of a starting point on a lot of commercial fisheries that I go to, and that is pellets. So I've got myself some 2s, 4s and 6mm fishery pellets, and that's my starting point on most of the fisheries around the country. Pellets probably wins more matches than any other bait, really. It's such a simple bait to fish. It's a bait that these fish are quite often used to seeing. So how do I approach a new peg, a new swim? Well, I can actually see a few carp sort of cruising on the top. They're getting close to me, so that's sort of one go-to that I've set up is a shallow rig. I've just got a longish lash on the top kit. This one's a 13 Dura slip, so I'm keeping an eye on because they're getting closer. I might have a go for one. So I've got a long lash so I can swing to a fish without the pole tip spooking a fish. And you can intercept these cruising fish, and quite often that's a good starting point. If those fish cruise down in front of me in the start of a match or start of a session, then I'd be stupid not to have a go for them, really. A plop of a pellet quite often in front of their noses is sort of instinctive, really. Quite often if they want to feed, they'll have a go. If they're not interested, you know, that they just won't be caught on some days, but on some days it can be brilliant. It can be a brilliant starting point. So at the minute I've got a 4x10 carp shallow float, really simple. I've got it set 16 inches with a 0.13 hook length with a 16 GPM, a band on the hair for, you know, banding a 6mm pellet. I'll stop looking at them and carry on talking for a minute. So forgetting about cruising fish, my starting point on a lot of fisheries is my short line. It's a line that you can feed straight away. Have a little look sort of either side. You've got an angler next to me today. I can have a look at what he's doing, how he's catching, but I can feed that line, start on that swim, and not sort of worry about feeding my other lines. And quite often if you go all gung-ho at the start, feed this line, feed that line, it might be that you fed the wrong bait or the wrong size pellets and you sort of ruined your swim right from the start. So by starting short, you can sort of feel your way into it, have a good idea of the sort of size of the fish in the lake, and sort of go from there. So at the minute, I've already plumbed this line. Let's put a plummet on now. And what I've looked for I just ship out. I've gone right out to 6 metres to begin with, and I'm looking for where the silt is. So I can feel that the bottom's quite soft there. I've got 11 hollow, and I can feel it sort of sticking to the bottom, and I've worked my way back, still in the silt, and ideally, well, perfectly for me, it's actually on this section here that I'm on a hard bottom. I come back, it's reasonably flat, so I've got a nice little area there, so that's a really good starting point to fish. It's sort of a comfortable distance, so I can throw bait if I want to, but that to me is like a good starting point, really. I mean, if it was a fishery that I knew that there were big weights, I'd maybe have a swim sort of a section less. You can see there it's a bit shallower, it's a foot shallower. If there are a lot of fish in a venue, I'd have a line on that as well, and maybe even start there with pellets. Just that slightly bit of shallower water, and sometimes sort of reduce the amount of liners and fish in your peg, and you can sort of catch fish a lot cleaner. But I don't think it's going to be sort of manic and hectic here, so my instinct is to fish in slightly deeper water, just there, where it's nice and flat, and that'll be my starting point. Other swims, I've only actually set 2 other lines up so far. I'm just going to feel my way into the session. I mean, I'm not afraid of setting new lines up as we go along. You don't have to set everything up at the start, and you know, that's that. I'm sort of quite flexible in my plan. So we've got a far bank there, as you can see, lots of rushes and things. It's actually quite deep when I've gone over there. A lot of it's sort of 2-3 foot against the reeds. There's a few shallower bits, and I've actually, to begin with, I've sort of gone into sort of 2 foot of water because it's a sort of an ideal starting point, especially with pellets, and that'll give me a good idea of what's what, really. I've targeted that shallower area. Again, like I said before, I don't want too many line bites. When you're fishing in sort of 3 foot of water, it can be a bit problematic, especially when there's sort of reeds and stuff. You can see a few reeds knocking there. So when I am faced with that, you know, if it was the height of summer, then I'll maybe look to fish shallow against that cover, because that's going to be where the fish want to be. The problem is it's going to be difficult to catch on the bottom in quite a large depth of water. So I've ended up targeting sort of 2 foot of water to begin with. And again, I'm keeping it really simple over there, or at least my sort of initial plan is just to feed sort of half a dozen of these 4mm fishery pellets in a cab pot, and with a 6 or a 4mm hard pellet on the hook, I'm going to target it, that area, same as I am on a short line, excuse me. So that rig, like I said, I've got a small cab pot. All I do is just sort of put half a dozen in a pot. I can sprinkle a few out. Sometimes making a bit of noise on the water, dropping it from a height can be good. Sometimes you've got to sneak it in, because like I said, it can be a little bit too deep and you don't want to be creating loads of noise on some days. But it's a new fishery, so we'll have to have a little bit of an experiment and a little bit of a play around. I didn't mention the rig on my short line is actually the same float as I'm using across, even though they're different depths. So I've got a 4x12 maggot float, exactly the same float. So I've got a 1.5 hollow bristle, you can see it really visibly, but importantly it's quite sensitive. So I've chosen to fish the same float on both lines, 2 different rigs, 2 different depths, but the same float, because I want a slightly sort of more positive rig on the line across to sort of reduce the amount of sort of line bites and the amount it gets wafted around. Just create a nice little stable rig to set a trap. I want to feed that bait and sort of be patient, lift and drop, but I don't want it wafted around too much. So I could have fished sort of a 4x10, but I've opted to fish slightly sort of more positive, slightly heavier float. I mean, I wouldn't be afraid to sort of step it up to a 414 or a 416 if I felt there were lots of fish in the peg. Like I said today, I've got a feeling it's going to be steady, so I'm not opted for really heavy rigs, but it's a good starting point. And like I said, I can change my plan and set another rig up during the session. But it's the same as on the short line, except this time I've got a 3-inch 011 to an 18 GPM band on a hair again. Not gone for expander pellets because it's summertime now. I want to be nice and positive. I want to avoid small fish, and these fish are used to eating hard pellets. It's what I'm used to fishing, it's what I'm confident in. So that's my main starting point. Other areas of the peg, down here I've got a nice little margin, little pallet to fish to. Actually plumbs up really nice. It's actually 18-inch, it's really flat. So my initial plan is to keep it really simple. I've got some soaked 2mm pellets. I can experiment with the feeding. I can big pot it, or I could put a cab, sort of a medium-sized cab pot like this, and just sort of play it by ear, see what's what really. If there's a lot of big carp in a venue, then big potting might be good. Or if I am just fishing for F1s, then a small cab pot with a few 2mm pellets, maybe even some ground bait. But at the minute I'm just going to keep it really simple, reasonably heavy micro pellets down there, and then I've got a few hook bait options. I can either fish a worm over the top, or a piece of worm, or I've got some corn I can crack open later, just to give me a few options on the hook baits. But that's it, really simple to begin with. Typically the carp have moved off now I've been talking, so might as well start the session on my short line. Like I said before, just going to set a little bit of a trap. I'm going to start off with a 4mm hard pellet on the hook, just going to band it. And then I'm going to feed sort of 6 or so, maybe 10 fishy pellets. Dunk it in the water so it doesn't spill out. And sometimes when you've got fishery pellets, it helps them sink, because they can float depending on what you get given. I'll take the section off. So this is my starting point. I think initially, because we've been talking and that, I'm going to just hold my pole a few foot off the water, and I'm actually going to rattle those pellets out and make a bit of a noise on the water. Nice little plop there. And I'm just going to slowly lower it down. So at the minute I've got my shot quite spread out. Because it is summertime, you can catch fish on the drop. But if there was a lot of fish and I was getting bites straight away, I could always slide them shot down. Is that a little indication? And create a bit of a more positive rig, and just a rig that gets straight down, nice and stable. A little dink there, a good sign. Just going to slowly lower it back in case it's still there. So I've got a far bank marker there, and I've kept it really accurate. I've lowered that rig over the top of where those pellets have gone in. Like I said before, it's a nice flat area, and it's up the slope a little bit away from the silt. Quite often when you're fishing pellets over silt, it can be quite difficult to, might have been a small fish that. Yeah, when you're fishing over silt, it can get a bit messy, and the fish can dig out the bottom, and you have to keep plumbing up quite often, because it'll change depth when they're disturbing the silt. But when you've got a nice hard bottom like this, it's almost like feeding the fish on a dinner plate. There's no mess there. Might be a few silverfish actually. And give it a little bit longer, then I'm going to feed again, because if I'm getting that many indications, there must be a few roach and stuff. Like I said, it's all about experimenting. I've started on 4mm pellets, but if I am getting small roach and whatever might be in the venue, I'd rudd, then I could step it up to 6mm. Seagull there. So I'm thinking I need to feed again, because I've had a few tiny little indications there. So nothing's happening. So what I'm going to do, instead of throwing, I'm going to try and keep accurate. I'm just going to put in another 5. try making a bit of noise again, see what happens. There we go. See, so I know there's some bait in the peg. The other great bait options at this time of year, especially sort of when the fish have just spawned, is maggots and casters. Not actually got that many with me today, so we're not really bothered, but sometimes they can really switch on to natural bait, so when you go into a new venue it's worth keeping that in mind and always have a few different options with you if pellets doesn't work. More often than not, pellets is a safe bet on sort of any commercial fishery really. Like I said, I've got an angler next to me and I know he's got some maggots with him, so while I'm fishing pellets I can obviously keep an eye on him, see what's happening, and if the pellets don't work, then if it was a match I'd know to change to different baits. Hopefully we catch a few fish on this line to begin with, and then I can start working my way across. And typically on a sort of a small lake like this, I like to start short, work my way across, and then maybe the last hour I can catch a few fish back down the edge again, or closer to me, maybe on this line. But it's all about sort of keeping it cautious really. There's the one. Starting short, work my way out, and I could pick a few fish off here, this line, until it goes quiet. And then I've got the option of starting again, different lines. Just fighting a bit. So like I said, I've got 11 hollow, which is sort of my go-to on a commercial that I don't really know. I can quite happily fish for F1s on this. Looks like a big F1. But if I do hook a big carp, you know, I've hooked massive carp on this elastic, so I've got every confidence in it. It's all about doing things you're confident in and using a kit that you know is going to work when you're fishing a new fishery. I'm just going to take it steady, make every fish count to begin with. No point rushing. He's scrapping well. Where's he going? There he is. That's a lovely chunky Packington F1, that one. See if we can hold him up. Look at that one. Nice chunky fish to start off. So now I've caught that, I'm thinking it's a nice chunky F1, but it's not, you know, I'm not going to need a huge amount of those to build a weight really. That was sort of 2-3 pounds. Catch 10 of those, you've got 50-60 pounds. So I'd sort of split up my session. I'm thinking, well, what can I catch in 10 minutes on each line, and what does that equate to over the sort of 5 hours? If I can catch £20 an hour, then I know that's going to be £100 at the end of the session. But we've caught one there, so I'm going to just repeat the process until the fish tell me that it's not right, or they move away. More often than not, you can catch a couple of fish, even if it is a hard session on this line. So rattle out a few pellets. But if I did think there were a lot of fish on this line, I'd sneak them in without making any noise. But we've caught one, made a lot of disturbance, so I just I want that noise of hitting the water to draw the fish back in again, because we did have to wait a little while for that fish to come in. Little indication there. So I think, well, catching your first fish always gives you the confidence that you're doing the right thing, but I think today is going to be about setting a few traps like this, being patient, trying a few different areas of the swim, and then later on the session maybe be a bit more positive with the margins, and hopefully those carp start feeding. And if the sun does come out, then there might be a few cruisers and fish on the top to catch too. But it's a good little start, a little confidence boost when you catch one straight away. So I'm going to stick with this line, see what happens, and then we'll try a few different things during the day, and hopefully we catch a few fish. Right, so while I'm fishing this line I can actually see a great big carp, so I'm not going to waste any time. I'll pick up my shallow rig, slip on a 6mm pellet, nice size fish actually, and see if we can get a bonus carp. Just going to try and flick it in front of it, make a bit of a noise. Oh, she's gone past it. Let me try again. It's over there. So I want the pellet to make a nice little plop as it hits the water. No, it's gone past it. There's another one off to the right. I'm just going to take a few sections off to make it easier. But trying for these cruising fish, like it's not really doing any harm to my peg because I'm not feeding anything. I can always go back to my short line. That fish I saw was probably about £8, so it's a big bonus if you can catch one, because that's sort of 2 or 3 F1s. So it's worth sort of being patient and waiting and looking around for fish. He's just drifted off. It's all about taking your chances when you got it. I was probably a bit slow off the mark on that one, but we'll ship back, go back on the short line, and hopefully there'll be another one later. Oh, there's a tiny little bite. I thought that was going to be a silverfish then. So it's always worth seeing if they are bigger fish. Sometimes the biggest fish can give you the smallest indication. This one might be a carp. So I've plumbed up so that the sort of base of the bristle is sort of showing really when I've plumbed up. So when you do get tiny indication, it's going to show up on the float straight away. There's no sort of wind to speak of today, so I can get away with fishing like that. And when you are fishing with hard pellets, it's quite important that you don't fish too over depth, because you will miss a few bites. I think because there obviously are quite a few fish sort of in the area, what I'm going to do is actually going to flick a few pellets onto the line. And that way, when I do sort of land this fish, there's a few fish sort of mooching around there, ready for my next fish. Gonna keep pole tip nice and low because I think it's actually quite a big fish, this. Oh, foot pulled out just the last minute. It's actually not a carp, it's a great big F1, that one. The size of that. Might even be £6, that one. Look at that fish. Great big F1. Didn't expect to catch them that big today. Nice bonus. So I flicked a few pellets out there, so hopefully there's another fish waiting for it. But it was a tiny little bite, and like I said, sometimes tiny little indications like that can be the biggest fish in the lake. So same again, I'm going to keep it exactly the same. 10 pellets in the pot, give it a dunk. Because I flicked a few pellets out there, I'm actually going to just lower the rig out without feeding, see if we can catch or get a bite straight away. And something I like to do quite often, oh, that was a bite, is when you hook the fish, you can actually turn the pot over, feed your bait, ready for the next fish. And that's a way to really sort of speed up your rhythm, if you can get away with doing that. Just gonna keep lifting and dropping, a bit of movement, sometimes that can grab their attention. That great big ghostie's come back again, but because I'm getting indications here, I'm going to stick with this. There we go. So I'm turning the pot over, fed from the next fish. That ghostie's teasing me out there, but we're catching, so it doesn't really matter. Doesn't matter if you're catching great big F1s like this. Another lovely chunky F1. So it's turning out to be quite a good little session so far. Same again, 4mm pellet. Some bait in my pot. See, when I hooked that fish, I turned it over and fed the swim while I was playing the fish. So hopefully, on an ideal situation, I could lower this straight in without feeding, hook one, and do exactly the same thing again. So I'm still not worried about feeding my other lines. I mean, if you had a bit of open water, you could maybe ping a few pellets, sort of kickstart your next sort of gambit. But because we got these rushes, I don't want to be feeding loads of bait in the rushes and potentially get them up and slurping and messing my peg up. I just want to keep it nice and simple, just like this, setting little traps up, waiting for a couple of fish to come in the peg. Hopefully when they come in we can catch them. Actually missing a couple bites there. If the venue was sort of dominated by carp, I think I tend to fish sort of a 6-inch hook length, because that way you can sort of catch those fish on the drop a bit more. Or when you're fishing with a carp, you do find that a lot of the bites come when you're lifting and dropping or laying the rig in, so a 6-inch can be really effective. But on a venue, I don't know. Just to begin with, I started with a 4 and it seems to be about right. The sun's coming out now, so potentially it might be time to target shallower water. And that far bank and the sort of inside margins are going to warm up, especially with the sun hitting it. And those fish will want to move into shallow water if the sun's out. So hopefully this line comes good still, and then we'll start looking at other lines, targeting that far bank, and maybe even catch a few fish down the edge later on. Okay, so we've had a brilliant little start on that short line. It's been probably better than I thought really, some great big F1s. And if this was a match, I'd carry on fishing that line and catch as much as I could. But because we're fishing a little session, filming a little session today, we're going to fast forward it a little bit and go over to what would probably be my next line of attack, which is that shallower water on the far bank. On a lot of commercial fisheries or sort of canal, snake lake sort of type venues, you get the odd little cutout, maybe the odd bit of shallower water where you've got perhaps sort of a 1 or 18-inch, and it's in those sort of depths that I tend to fish maybe ground bait, micro pellets, maggots, But because we're faced with some deeper water today, we've actually got 2.5 foot as my sort of shallowest bit, if you like. So I'm going to target hard pellets again, exactly the same as we did on the short line. Just going to set up like a little trap up, exactly the same as we were. I'm going to put a 4mm pellet on the hook, because that's what we caught on the short line. And you do quite often find that just by fishing that short line, it tells you what to do on your other lines, and it gives you a little bit of insight. So I'm going to feed the I'm going to put a dozen or so pellets in the pot. I'm not going to feed them at once. I'm just going to rattle a few out and make a bit of a noise initially. But because potentially we might have a problem with line bites and foul-hooked fish, we might have to be careful how we feed these pellets, really, because quite often if you do make a bit of a noise and a plop as the bait hits the water, the fish can come up, and that's not ideal really, because we want to catch them on the bottom. But because it's our first go, we'll make a bit of a noise, let them know the bait's there, and hopefully we get a few indications and fish straight away. So I'm nice and accurate. I've got tape on my pole, so I know exactly what distance to fish. I've got a far bank marker. It's a bit of a slope, but by fishing nice and accurately like that, you know you're going to fish the right depth. Actually a carp cruising around as well, so it tells me the fish want to be in shallow water. Ooh, that's a nice positive bite. It's a good sign. So by just starting cautiously like this, you're not going to ruin your peg straight away, because potentially if you were sort of to catapult bait while I was fishing that short line, there could be fish everywhere sucking the reeds, trying to get bits of bait out the reeds, and when it's like that, they're quite hard to catch. And I think there's sort of no way back, if you like. But if you're starting cautiously, just feeding small bouts of bait, you're not going to ruin your peg. It's just about catching what you can to begin with. See, I fed some bait there, I missed a bite, so I'm going to feed again, because I've got a feeling a lot of that bait got eaten as soon as it went in, which is a good thing really, because we want to get regular bites and be in and out all the time. Don't want to be waiting too long. So just by feeding sort of 4 or 5 more pellets, you know there's a bit of bait in your peg. And it's going to draw a few fish back in again. A little liner there, so there's one there, eating those pellets. Hopefully he'll pick mine up. So we're obviously coming to a bit of bait. There's a liner there, just going to lift it out again. But by starting on pellets, there's no set rules really. If it's not working, you could fish this line exactly the same spot, but swap it over to sort of worms casters if you think pellets aren't right, and maybe meat if it's allowed. But at the same time, if the weather was a bit cooler and we needed to draw a few fish in a peg, there's no reason why we can't feed like a little nugget of 2mm pellets, or maybe even a tiny bit of ground bait, just draw the fish in. The fish should tell you if it's right or wrong, because you'll end up with too many line bites, or you might foul hook a few fish. See, I lifted the rig out, dropped it back in again, and I had an indication straight away. So I either dropped it on a fish's head, or that bit of movement sort of stirred a response. Another missed bite then. Might be that 6mm pellets are the way to go. At least you know if the float goes under, it's generally going to be a proper fish, but that looks like an F1 or something. Try and drag it away from the reeds. before it snags me. So potentially, because this fish has run me ragged a little bit, might be better off fishing a 13 hollow, just stepping it up a little bit, but this one's come out alright. Not too many snags. An F1, I think. Oh no, it's a little mirror carp. So we didn't catch these on the shorter line, so potentially there might be a few carp on the far bank waiting for us. Nice immaculate little mirror there, beautiful fish. So I'm just going to repeat the process again. I think because we did miss a few bites, I'm actually going to put 6mm on the hook this time. See if that's been a little bit better. I'll stick with a 4 still as feed. And because we've had indication straight away and I've caught that fish, then it just sort of gives me the confidence that it's the right thing to do. And I'd be sticking with this line, I think. Catching what I can. If it dried up, I could maybe plumb up a metre to the left, right, or a few metres. Start a new spot again. Reed's getting in the way there. And quite often if you start a new spot, even if it's a few metres away, you'd be amazed the difference it makes. It's like kick-starting your swim all together again, even though it's just a few metres away. It just seems to work. So we catch another couple of fish on this. Then we might even try the margins. I think it's a little bit too early, but I'll talk you through how I would fish it and feed it, even if we don't catch anything. Run you through the rigs and how I feed it. With a bit of luck we'll catch one, but I think it's a little bit too early on in the day, but we'll still talk you through it and see what happens. So there we go, there's another one. I think he's playing me at the minute. I've got him out of the reeds. I think if I did come here again, probably start on a 13 hollow. Because it is a little bit of a jungle over there. It's not too bad. I mean, I don't think there's too many snags, but I think a 13 probably would have been the better option, considering the size of some of these fish. So that's it really, a really simple way of just targeting the far bank without feeding too much bait, without messing your peg up. And when you've got deeper, a deeper far bank to fish to, you have got to be a little bit careful with what you feed and how you go about things. I mean, if I was getting too many line bites, even by doing this, I could try targeting even shallower water, tighter in against the bank. That would reduce the amount of line bites I get. But this has been quite good. It's sort of 2.5 foot with 4mm. Switched to a 6mm on the hook to avoid them little fish, and it's been quite good really. Nice to sort of turn up to a venue and sort of catch fish really, even though I've never seen this lake before, and we're learning a few things as we go along. So now we've caught a few carp. Interestingly, it's been mainly carp on the far bank and big F1s down the middle, so we're learning where the different species are. The carp are obviously wanting to be in shallower water. With that in mind, Might even try and catch down the edge. I'll be very surprised if we do catch down the edge because it is still very early on in the day, but I'm going to talk you through what I would do sort of on a lot of venues that I'm faced with. And with this sort of edge here, I've not really got an edge on the other side, it's mainly in front of this pallet next to me. I've actually got 18 inch in front of the pallet and it's lovely and flat. So I think I actually saw a little tail there when the cameraman stood on the platform, so there was a fish there. But I think if this was a sort of a match and I was going on it sort of an hour and a half to go, I'd probably look to pick up my big pot and I'd probably feed half a pot of pellets just like that and I'd see what happens. I think in 18 inches you'd probably see a few tails and indications come up. But I think because we're cheating a little bit, I'm going to go straight on with the biggest cab pot. I'm just going to see if one fish comes in rather than getting a few fish together, because I think it is early on in the day. I don't think being mega positive is right really. So all I'm going to do, I'm going to go straight for a big worm, nice single worm. I've got a 14 GPM, 4-inch hook length. I've just got a 13 on at the minute, but I think if we did start catching a few bigger fish, then I'd step it up to a 15. So I'm going to take the big cab pot, fill it up with micro pellets. I'm going to go straight in. I'm going to see if we can sort of get a fish come straight over that bait, and hopefully, because there's not too much bait in the peg, we might be able to catch one fish at a time doing that. But if we were staying later on in the day, like I said, I'd be more positive with a bigger pot. At the minute I'm just going to lower the pot in, be nice and accurate, small pile of bait, got my worm over the top so it's a nice big visual bait, and if a fish does come over the top of that, then it's going to see it and hopefully slurp it up. I mean, if I needed somewhere to go during the day in a match, then this would be sort of a good way of doing it without being too positive. And then when the time of day does come, sort of hour and a half to go, maybe the last hour, I could be more positive with a bigger pot and go from there really. And I think because it is 18 inch, I definitely have some ground bait with me, like a expander base ground bait, like crushed expander or match method mix. I'd really over wet it so it goes straight down to the bottom and stays on the bottom. It's amazing how much water you can add to it. And I think because we've had them sort of small nuisance fish on the shorter line, I'd probably lean away from maggots and I'd maybe stick to sort of micro pellets and ground bait with a big visual bait over the top, like a worm, maybe even corn. But I think doing this is probably a safe bet. Oh, there's a fish there actually, dragging under. No, there was a fish in the peg, so that's a good sign. Worm's okay. I think we'll do exactly the same thing again. There we go, we actually caught one in the edge. Just by cab potting them 2mm pellets, soaked fishery pellets, drawn a few fish in, and we've got one. Nice chunky carp, that one. So there we go. Caught on a few different methods. We've got a few fish coming into the margins now. So it just goes to show a few simple methods, different areas you swim, and hopefully you've picked up a few tips that's going to help you catch a few fish like these on commercial fisheries that you don't necessarily know. So really simple tactics. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe Preston YouTube channel, and thanks for watching.